Welcome back to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Kintner from Vestal PD in New York. He has 29 years experience in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Kintner. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Of course, I am looking forward to this conversation. I feel like we have had a couple pre-calls before this, and there's a lot of really good information and topics that I'm prepared for today. So I'm really looking forward to it. But before we kind of dive into your law enforcement journey and wisdom, I
Yeah,
wanted to maybe first see what was your life like before policing? What was your childhood like?
yeah. I grew up in a law enforcement family. My father started in the police department that I lead today in 1969. So I grew up in the business, and I remember I have fond memories as a child of spending a lot of time at the police station. My father would bring me in from time to time to accomplish some work or whatnot. And I would have a chance to meet the officers, speak with the officers. I always thought they were larger than life. The silly term would be superheroes or whatnot, but the uniform, the position itself, um, at a very early age, it was intriguing to me. Yeah, moving through, you know, elementary school and whatnot, going into middle school. I was from an athletic family. My father was always big in athletics and kind of was a high school superstar here in Vestal. So that was promoted within the household. I played three sports. I wrestled, I played football, and played baseball. So I was always involved in something actively. That was kind of the rule. He was never going to tell us what we had to do, but we were going to be doing something.
Mm.
So I stayed busy with that, obviously schoolwork and things like that. Um, and then moving through high school, as I started to get to the point where, I don't think you absolutely have to make decisions about the rest of your life in high school, but I kind of circled back to, um, you know, my interest in law enforcement, started having conversations with my father about following his path. um, had the opportunity to do some things in the police department, such as ride-alongs and stuff, especially when I was an upperclassman. Um, but more importantly, I was a student of an individual who knew how to do the job right.
Mm.
Okay, so he knew empathy. Um, he was non-judgmental. He always spoke the same way no matter what walk of life you came from. Being from the community, being raised in the community, I had the opportunity to hear from a lot of people about the work that my father did, and how on many occasions, he helped these individuals through difficult times. That also was appealing. Yeah, and ultimately, graduated high school, went to the local community college here, bounced around, did some odd jobs, and my first opportunity in law enforcement came when I was 22. So in New York State, they have what's called civil service examinations. So we have to test for police officer. And back then, there was a large amount of participation in those exams. So 380, 400 people would sign up. And we live in a relatively smaller region, okay, central New York, multiple police departments, five or six police departments. But as I mentioned in previous conversations, people weren't looking to retire uh, often. So when you certify those lists and you have hundreds of people on it, they back then they only held them about every 4 years. So, going to college and working some odd jobs, I kind of got hung up in between the civil service list from the time you can test. There's criteria on how old you have to be to test. And ultimately, the list had come out when I was about uh, 20 years old, still at that time, uh, too young to test. I was actually 19 at the time. I apologize. And so had to work some odd jobs and whatnot. Ended up going to work for a foundry and doing some really hard labor and kind of learning the value of hard work in that respect. And I had an older brother that was also involved in law enforcement, kind of followed the family path, and he had recently gone to work at the local sheriff's department in the corrections division. Called me one day and said, "Hey, they're looking to hire what was referred to as a special deputy. So you were paid hourly and you were kind of at will at the time." And I took the opportunity because it was double what I was making hourly at the place I was at the time, and I thought it would be a good opportunity. So I applied, I got interviewed, uh, and I was blessed to be hired in that role. So I stayed in corrections for about 5 years. Within that period of time, they held another exam. Fortunately, scored well enough to be considered for a law or a police officer position. And yeah, in May of 2002, I got my dream job, and I got to come to work for the Vestal Police Department. So
I love it. I wanted to circle back to your father because what an incredible resource to have growing up, especially entering into this career. And the word that you said was he knew empathy. And that is a topic that we talk about a lot. And the question is always like, how do you teach it? How do you learn it, especially as a young person who maybe hasn't gone through 20, 30 years in this career and has the opportunity to learn through experience. Were there any lessons that your dad taught you that kind of stuck with you throughout your career that you think helped you out?
there absolutely were. And as you're talking, I'm thinking of one of those specifically. I was about 12 years old. We had a smaller home back then in the late 70s, early 80s. Police officers didn't get paid very well. They made a modest salary. They always said, you weren't going to want for anything. Your kids would be clothed and fed and whatnot. But it was early morning, probably like 2 or 3 a.m. I don't know. I was too young. I didn't have a clock in my room and whatnot. But I remember being woken up by the light in the dining room, which was right outside my bedroom, and I could hear two people talking and communicating for a while. So actually, I woke up and I was curious as to what was going on. I knew it was not my mother and my father, and identified the other voice as being male. So at some point, my father enters my room, and of course, I act like I'm sleeping and I have no idea what's going on. He goes into my closet and he grabs a pair of shoes, he grabs a pair of jeans, and I believe a shirt, and he leaves. And obviously, I go back to sleep. Um, I wake up the next day. I don't ask much about it. He doesn't say much about it, but come to find out, he was a juvenile investigator for many years here in the town, and he dealt with people from all walks of life. And he had identified a young man who was about 14 years old, who was living in an environment that was um, very violent, domestic situations, drug abuse, mom and dad constantly not getting along. Uh, on that day, they had made the decision to remove the child from the household. Well, there was a delay in getting the organizations to come and pick the child up and whatnot. So my father ended up bringing him home. He actually fixed him something to eat. And what he had done is come in. We were about the same size. I was a little younger. And he got him a change of clothes, a better pair of shoes, um, and took care of him in the interim, right? So uh, obviously, I had an older brother, as I mentioned. He had found out about this, shared the story with me, and I think even at that young age of 11 or 12 years old, that, I mean, what an impact that made on me as far as, being sympathetic to people. My father constantly talked about the golden rule. It's not his rule, obviously, but it is, you treat everybody as you would want to be treated, right? And he really looked at his job that way. He understood it was his responsibility to make the most of it, to obviously take the opportunity to help people as much as possible. And so I would say that that was, a very early lesson for me is, hey, we're not just here to take care of each other. We're here to help people in the community, do our jobs as good citizens, and you can do that at a very young age.
Yeah.
So I think that really impacted me. And a fun fact about that is, and it's kind of an unfortunate one, is that later on in my corrections career, clearly we're identifiable by nameplates and things like that. I had an individual walk up to me at one point at the officer station, and he recognized my last name. He asked me if I was related to my father. His first name is Terry. He said, are you related to Terry? I said, yes, he's my dad. He said, he brought me to your house one night and he really helped me out. So I guess unfortunate that he, stayed in the system and maybe didn't get the help that he needed. But again, it was just one of hundreds of people that, approached me, not only, growing up, but in my position now in my career with the Vestal Police Department, that had made mention that he was instrumental in their lives at some point with helping them through a very difficult time. And again, to that point, he also impressed upon us that, this profession isn't about just arresting people and putting them in jail. I mean, you have an opportunity, you have a duty, as a public servant to, try to navigate it for people. And it's not always it can't always be the end result. Maybe there's a different path forward.
You're pulling at my heartstrings. I'm already getting like misty-eyed over here. The word that I wrote down was compassion. Right, what an incredible amount of compassion to have for other people to say, hey, like I recognize that they're going through a hard time and I'm gonna show them that they matter and that there's people in their corner. And I don't know if I shared this with you before, but I came from that environment.
Okay.
So you explaining that to me of someone coming from drug addict parents, domestic violence, like that was my reality when I was a kid. And so I think that's why it tugged on my heartstrings so much because, um, what I would have given to have someone do that for me and to show me that compassion. And, it is unfortunate that maybe that didn't end, um, in the way that maybe everyone hoped that it would have. And I think about that a lot in my life too, because you do have those crossroad moments, where you either choose an unhealthy path for yourself. And, I was faced with that of like, do I end up like my parents? Like, do I go down this negative path, which was kind of where I was going in my young life. I was choosing the wrong friends and the wrong path and, getting into trouble. Or do you choose a healthier path for yourself? And I think everyone has that decision. But, from your father's perspective, it's like you can only do as much as you can, and you can control your actions and the way that you treat people. And then ultimately, it's up to them to choose what path they want to take for themselves. And if you treat people with compassion and respect and you do everything that you can, then you can sleep better at night knowing that you did everything in your power to support people. And I love that you said that policing is more than just arresting people. There's so much more to what you do than that small piece of it.
Exactly. And as we move forward in our conversations, we're going to talk about, like, very important to me, not only in the department but in the community, is humanizing this profession. So, and trying to break down those historical barriers, the badge, the gun, you know the appearance in general. And I can get into that more later, but one of the other things he always said is every day is an opportunity to make a difference. And he really lived by that. And we saw it every day. And I guess one of the points to make is I never knew that boy's name. I never knew that boy's name. My dad never talked about it to me. Like I said, I found out from my brother, who was obviously living at home at the time, and he didn't know his name. And my father did things like that all the time, and he never expected any, notoriety for it. I would bet that maybe even his superiors didn't know that he took that opportunity to to make those arrangements and do that for that young man. Like, he never expected, to be paid more or awards or anything like that. So yeah, when you're talking about like really being influenced, and and I want to clarify, like, he never said you have to do this job or you should do this job. It was whatever you want to do. Um, but it's hard to avoid that path, when you grow up and you see all these things, and you are, you're in this environment and you really appreciate the profession.
Absolutely. So you talked a little bit about starting in corrections. That was kind of your one of your first steps into this career path, correct?
Yes.
How was that? How was the environment in corrections?
So I'll say it was very difficult. Almost immediately, I was 22 years old. I was a young man. As I said, the position that I held initially prior to corrections officer was called special deputy. So you were at will, um, and you had no union protections or anything like that. You basically did the same job as the corrections officers. Um, the uh, the corrections division at the time was understaffed, and the facility was overpopulated. So we had a lot of overtime. So my first 4 weeks, they worked a 4-and-2 rotation, 4 days on, 2 days off, were 16-hour days
Mm,
every day. And I speak to this now when we presented academies and things like that. I mean, I could not have done that nowadays. Thankfully, I was a young man, um, just entering into the profession. Um, so it was physically taxing, and I know that you've discussed this previously with other chiefs of police, is like, kind of making sure that we're paying attention to how many hours everybody's working, because so many studies have come out. I just attended a presentation a couple of weeks ago up in Albany where they talked about sleep deprivation
yeah.
and all the problems that can come with that and whatnot. So that was my introduction. My first 4 weeks on the job was 16-hour days. The state minimum standards were 60 incarcerated individuals were supervised by one officer. So that was the ratio. Um, I will say you grow up in a hurry. You have to have the right attitude. And the foundation that was set for me as a young man, even prior to taking the job, was very integral in being successful. Okay, because if you can't communicate, if you can't problem solve, if you can't multitask, you're going to have very long days. And you're dealing with individuals that are in very difficult situations. Some of them have history, some of them have violent history. And when you're talking about 16-hour days and then coming back and doing 16-hour days, and I know in one of your previous podcasts, they broke it down as, I mean, think about that. You leave work, by the time you're changed, that's 16 and a half hours. Your ride home, that's almost 17 hours. Then you're trying to get to sleep, knowing that you got to get up and do it all over again, potentially the next day. And your job is to make sure people are behaving. Your job is to take care of them and help them through the process, and everything that goes with it. But it's also to monitor behavior. And uh, it goes without saying, and I can be very honest and vulnerable about this. Like, there was days when, you know, you kind of caught yourself slipping a little bit, and kind of starting to, zone out, if you will, because of the fatigue.
Yeah.
And as I said, I know there's different philosophies in different departments and whatnot, but That was very difficult. The environment itself, just by nature, is negative. All right, you're dealing with people that don't want to be there, that ended up there for all sorts of reasons, and that has the social contagion, if you will. That is something that no doubt, if you spend enough time in there, it can uh, it can be absorbed into you. And I'm referring to the officers. So there was a lot of burnout. There was a lot of morale issues and things of that nature. So you had to deal with it on both sides. So it was a very difficult process and an introduction into my career in law enforcement. But to your question, uh, the way I navigated it is one, I tried staying in good physical health. Um, I participated in athletics in college, so I wasn't far removed from that. I had kind of a disciplined schedule. And, obviously you have to adapt that to what you're doing at that present time. But I was able to, you know, keep that incorporated into my daily activity. Even working those 16-hour shifts, I found time, a half hour, 40 minutes to do some physical activity to have that outlet for the stress. And as I mentioned, I was making twice what I was making at my previous job. So financially, I was happy with that. Um, and it was a better opportunity for me. And the other thing I realized is, people pay attention, and the people I'm referring to are your superiors, right? So if you don't have a bad attitude, if you don't have a lot of problems, if you are polite and respectful, um, they see that, and because of that, I believe that you're putting yourself in a good place for more opportunities, and that's kind of how my corrections career went. uh, Although it was a very difficult environment for somebody my age, I made the most of it. It was where I had to be at that time. It was the best fit for me. And so again, I decided, hey, I'm going to see how far I can go. And I had a lot of opportunities there. And I have nothing negative to say about my time in corrections. And I have nothing but respect for my brothers and sisters that do that job. They are the unsung heroes.
Mm.
Okay. They are the ones that they get very little credit for the job that they do. But, you know, when you talk about trying to stay positive every day and having all of those factors working against you, the environment, the individuals, the shifts, the fatigue, it definitely tested me early on, and I'm glad I stayed the course. Uh, I do not regret one bit of it. I think that you grow up in a hurry, you learn how to communicate with individuals, and really it was like almost getting a degree. You're going to school every day. In the corrections environment, one of the benefits of that is that you can make mistakes, and as long as they're not significant ones, like you can apply, what you should have done moving forward. So specific to communications. So it really does help you identify with, again, all walks of life, the officers, the individuals that are in there for whatever reason. And it definitely was a building block for me.
I appreciate that you mentioned sleep and how that impacts performance, how that impacts mental health, because you're exactly right. There's so many statistics out there that everyone can research, but there was one that I saw that said that if you don't get enough sleep, that your reaction time and your decision making is similar to being impaired. And obviously you're not impaired, but it's this like relationship to that because you understand what it's like to have a couple drinks and what the delay is for that decision making or that reaction time, right? And so
Yes.
having that lack of sleep impacts performance, it impacts decision making. And then on top of that, like you said, being in an environment where it is inherently negative, and you said that that seeps into you. Like that word, I was like,
Mm,
ooh, like that's such a great descriptive word because anyone who's listening can relate to that, right? Where if you're
sure.
around, because positivity is contagious, negativity is also contagious, right? And you have experience in both, where you're around a group of people that just really lift you up, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
man, like I want to be around them more because their mental attitude is just awesome. And I feel really rejuvenated when I hang out with them. And then we all have experience with the opposite of being in an
Mm.
environment where you're like, wow, like I just feel like I'm being drained. Like I am going to turn into them if I keep hanging out with them, right? And so you said physical activity helped you to kind of offload some of that stress. But I really do think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or if there's anything that you did, but I think that having that positive mental attitude and that like mental resilience to keep going is a trained skill. Do you feel like you did anything specific that just helped you get through the negativity piece and maintain a positive mental attitude for yourself?
Well, so I think I did what I was taught to do. Stay positive, work hard, do your best every day. And in an environment like that, I decided very early on I was going to be the same person in the environment that I was supervising, right? Because the individuals that are incarcerated, they're already going through a very difficult period. The last thing that they need is uh, more stress and anxiety, depending on who's working in there. And
Mhm.
that was one thing I saw too. And I'll talk about this as we move through. You really pay attention um, if you're doing due diligence to the people that are successful and the people that are unsuccessful. And usually, unsuccessful people uh, fall down that rabbit hole of negativity, right? And as you said, and I believe it 100%. You're going to see both sides and you're going to make a decision. And misery loves company, as they say. If you choose to go down that path, uh, don't be shocked if you end up in the same boat. And kind of I'm on the other side of things. And as we talk about culture and establishing things, it's so easy to be inspiring even in that job, just to tell somebody, hey, you did a good job, with your assigned task, or, we had jobs for the incarcerated individuals to do during the day. Hey, I really appreciate that. Or, you did a good job with what I asked you to do. Um, things like that. And then as I moved through my corrections career, very early on, I was identified by the administration and designated a field training officer. So I think that had a lot to do with attitude.
Yeah.
Um, I was not a complainer. I felt very fortunate. Like I have a job. It's difficult at times, but pridefully, am I going to allow myself to, you know, basically move away or, not subscribe to the core values that I was brought up with and kind of how I viewed myself at the time. Ultimately, we're responsible for our own actions and reactions and things like that. And I think it was very important to me at that time to make an impression as much as I could, to do the best job that I could, and to be happy, uh, and positive in doing it. So a lot of things that, again, that were beneficial from that part of my path.
I'm so glad that you said that we all have control over our actions and reactions to things because it's so true. And someone taught me that really early on. They're like, there's so many things that you cannot control, but you can control how you respond and how you react to every situation that you encounter. And that puts the power on you and the responsibility on you, which I think is important because a lot of times we're like, well, I did this because of this. And it's like, well, yeah, but like you had a choice on how to respond to that. There are a few things that popped up that I just want to mention because, and I don't know if you meant to say it this way, but I really loved this perspective. Of course, for your own personal wellness, you want to have that positivity for you to, not get burned out and to keep going in this career. But what you said was you wanted to do that for them. Like you wanted to have this positive mental attitude so that you could positively influence the community that you were serving. And how powerful is that, to have that? And it was like that selfless compassion that your father had that it seems like now you have too, coming into this career of like, hey, I just want to make sure that people feel valued and they feel respected and they feel human. And I think that that is such a great quality for anyone who's listening to, adopt. It's like you have that ability to inspire other people. You have that ability to make someone's day. And especially if there's a community that you're serving that maybe never ever had that. Like when I was growing up with my parents, and this is where I'm going to get like a little misty-eyed. I didn't have someone telling me I could be great. I didn't have someone saying good job. It was always, negative and it was always like as long as you don't end up like your parents, you're good. Or you're probably going to end up like your parents. And so like you're really not worthwhile. And there's a lot of people in this world in the communities that you're serving who come from an environment where it's so negative. They're not set up for success. And to have someone like you say, good job. Like, I appreciate you. I value you as a human, and you can aspire to be greater than your environment or your current situation. Like, I think that that is so powerful. And so, if you don't have that mental attitude for yourself, maybe you can adopt that so that you have it for others and you can carry other people through this life. So, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate it. And I think that, really if you look at what your responsibilities are, and again, go back to the golden rule that I was brought up with, you treat everyone as you'd want to be treated. It wasn't you treat everybody in the community outside that facility like you want to be treated, but inside you treat them different. No, it was everyone. All right. And we don't judge. Like, that was a very big thing for me. I have no idea what most of these individuals have been through. You just told your story. How many people have come from the same scenario, right? How many people did not have support growing up? How many people were not encouraged, to do their best or told that they could achieve anything? I was fortunate for that. My support system, you'll hear me mention this often as we talk. Like that is something that I fell back on my entire life and still do today. I am very blessed to be surrounded by people who not only understand kind of the dynamics of the job, but I have the benefit of uh, counseling or consoling with my father, who has been in the business. He's retired, of course, now, but since the '60s. So when we're looking at what we're doing nowadays and how we can make it better, we're talking about a lot of decades of to be able to reference. But specific to again that job, my job was not to judge them based on where they came from, why they're there. My job was to make sure I wasn't making things worse.
Mm.
Okay. And again, back to the story we discussed at the beginning about having the individual at my house, not knowing why, and showing empathy and being able to help that individual who, at that point in his life probably had taken some wrong turns and did some stuff without lack of supervision and in a loving environment to come home to and whatnot. So yeah, like very important. And as we talk, I wasn't even prepared for this, but um, it really is just a genuine response to the questions that you're asking and how I felt then, how I still feel today. And, is why, I look at things and say, how can we make it better constantly, to the point where my staff is always saying, oh, geez, here we go. And now, now we got another initiative. Now we got something else he wants to do and
Yeah.
whatnot. So,
I love
but
that. I
yeah.
know that wellness is a priority to you. And you said to me earlier that needing wellness in this career shouldn't impact your career. And I was hoping that you could maybe share a little bit of your philosophy on that, but also maybe times where you have seen, people reach out for help and it did impact their career, and then how you're trying to now turn that around and create a culture where there's trust and, people do feel like it's okay to be human and to need resources if they're going through something tough.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think that we've come so far in this respect where we discussed, wellness is now part of the interview process. So before officers are even hired to work here, in the interview, we're talking about background, where are you from, any things that have happened to you, because there's a backpack analogy that we use often when we're talking about wellness and whatnot. And once you start your career, uh, every negative incident adds another rock to that backpack. And you're talking about a minimum of 20 years in police work or law enforcement. Over time, it gets overwhelming and stressful and all that you accumulate in this job. But we never really think about the individuals coming into the job. What have you been through? Maybe they share a similar path as you do. Like, how did that impact you? How did you get through it? How
Mhm.
did you show resilience? It's going to be beneficial for both us, me as chief and my team, and the candidate to understand, hey, you know what, I've gone through hard times, and I've been through this situation, just to let you know, and it affected me, and so that's so important. And then as we move into the academy and how things have evolved with that, one of the things that they do that I'm such a huge fan of is they have a wellness night and they invite the family,
Mm.
right? So the officers report to the academy with the family, the people that they're going to be going home to, and they talk about what to expect and how to deal with things and resources for them. That's important too. They need to know that they're part of our family and they have these outlets also. But specific to your question, you know, I think that if we're doing our job right and people are going through a difficult time, it's incumbent upon us to get them the resources and the help that they need. And clearly, I started back in the late '90s, and you hear this often. I know you do because I watched some of the interviews that you didn't go to your boss and say, "Hey, I can't sleep. I had an infant death, or I had a bad motor vehicle accident, or a homicide, or a suicide. I'm not able to sleep, boss," because the answer would have been, well, maybe you're not cut out for the job, right? Maybe you have to do some deep thinking and decide whether you're going to be able to do, because this is part of it, right? This is part of it. We told you you're going to see bad things and whatnot. So now clearly we're at a moment in the history of this profession where we're learning that that answer is not acceptable, right? Because when you look at the post traumatic stress that we're now realizing in recent years and what people are suffering afterwards and how they have to go through the anxiety and the issues and the mental health problems, um, it is so important for us to understand it is our job. And one thing about me is I'm an accountability guy. So if somebody's going through a difficult time, it's my job directly to make sure that they're getting the resources and tools that they need. What I'm saying specifically is it should not dead end you. If
Mm.
you went through a period where, uh, maybe you needed a break, maybe you needed time off to get yourself situated for whatever reason, whether it be maybe you were drinking too much, or maybe you had sleep deprivation, or you were having an issue because of something you saw, that should not be defining of your career moving forward. That's what I mean by wellness um, should not be the end of your career, because you know growing up and going through this for as long as I have, I've seen both sides. I've seen some really good things. I'm fortunate to be a part of what I feel is the best thing moving forward, but I've seen some really bad leaders too
Yeah.
that brush things off, don't want to have to deal with it. It's an additional headache, whether it be staffing. Hey, if we have to give them a week off to kind of get their heads right, we got to hire somebody to fill that overtime and whatnot. I'll have those arguments all day long,
Yeah.
and to that point, we're very blessed. I I work and live in an area where we have tremendous amounts of support from our community. We engage with them often. They're always looking for ways to help us take care of things, and if there's anything they can do, and constantly sending food to the police station. They don't send donuts no more. I don't allow it. I said from now on, carrot sticks and celery. But we're blessed in that respect too. So I guess I guess the honest answer is, with all the support that I get, why wouldn't I be doing as much as I can to support those who are going out there every day, are doing the job. um, if they fall on hard times, they're human beings. They deserve the same discretion as anyone else, probably more because of the nature of the job. And, it's my job to make sure that that gets done.
Thank you. And you've said this a few times, and I kind of want to expand on this a little bit because there's always this question of stigma and culture and, having, to your point, having someone who maybe was not brought up in this career with that mentality that wellness is okay. And so you still have maybe a subset of people who still view wellness as unnecessary or as a quote unquote weakness. What is your secret sauce to culture? And what would you say to someone who maybe still has that mentality that wellness is weakness?
Well, I think we've done enough in recent years to kind of present it as a necessity.
Mhm.
Okay. So, and we've also had the opportunity to reset expectations, right? And reset understanding between myself, my staff, and the boots on the ground, the officers that are in the field every day and whatnot. It's so important that they know that we care about them. And when I say that, very important for me to mention staying engaged.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like, we're not a huge department, but we're decent size. And sometimes it's hard to keep up with new events and what's going on in people's lives. Uh, Thankfully, we have social media. My wife is my partner in that. When somebody announces that they're pregnant or whatnot, it's very important to me to reach out and congratulate them and whatnot. I think that that's the first bullet point, is really staying connected. I explained, we got young in a hurry. In a department of 50, we've hired 25 officers in the past 6 years. Most of them never worked for me. Okay, I'm the chief. I kind of have my administrative duties, but it's really an extension of my office. So I mentioned to you earlier about the buy-in. In order for me to present, uh, what I feel is adequate for for all who work here, my team has to buy into it. And I'm very fortunate and blessed to have a good group of supervisors to be an extension of what we feel is important and whatnot. And they also stay directly involved with the officers. All right. So important to have those relationships. Once again, to hey, at work, you're the boss. Okay. Um, but we can also have those conversations. You can confide in me, you can trust me, and whatnot. And beyond that, the officers obviously have relationships. And I know you've discussed this previously too, is that's very important, but you got to draw the line too at some point and make sure that you have friends or acquaintances that are not in the profession. Because if you spend all your time around police officers, if you spend all your time talking about work and what happened at work, and there's really no break in between.
Yeah.
And we obviously see the negative effects of that also. So I really think it's just presenting what we think is best, getting the buy-in from all that are involved, and presenting it as such, and continuing to reinforce it. That's a word I really like. Like, are we reinforcing this? You know, um, Often. Are
Yeah.
we reinforcing the need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, making sure that you are comfortable letting us know if things are happening and whatnot, specifically being removed from, you know, day-to-day operations and things like that. And, the patrol, which is the backbone of most agencies anyways. Once you're removed from that, you need to make sure that your message is being reinforced and the goals and the objectives are being reinforced through the chain of command and from the top down.
Yeah, I like the mentality of it's a continual effort. It's not just you say it one time, hey, this is a priority to us, and then that's kind of the end of it. It's this continuous showing, like you said, reinforcing that this is a priority, that this is important, and building, trust and buy-in over time, especially for those who maybe still are a little bit resistant to it. The more effort, the more like continual boots on the ground that you're doing, then I think the more receptive people become over time. Um, you also told me that you let people be who they are, and that has helped with morale and, keeping people upbeat. And you had said that, maybe facial hair, tattoos, things like that. Can you maybe explain a little bit about that and the like ROI that you've seen from allowing people to be who they are within the organization?
Yeah, so I've seen both sides of it, right? Like the officers really appreciate it. My colleagues in the region did not necessarily appreciate it when I took the opportunity to, you know, reduce the restrictions and things like that. Things that socially are acceptable nowadays. When you look at the, historical aspect of appearance and uniform and whatnot with law enforcement, of course, it's necessary to be you know, to look appropriate, to act appropriate, and things like that. But within that, I believe that there should be restrictions, right? We don't all need to walk the same, act the same, talk the same. And this starts again in the interview process when we're looking at candidates. I tell them very clearly, I'm not hiring you to be me. I
Mm,
don't want you to be me. I'm bringing you here to be you. Okay, the facial hair was obviously celebrated here within the department. The tattoos are socially acceptable now. I think that there's again a traditional stigma of when you're looking back decades ago of how people viewed that or people with that or where they came from and whatnot, which honestly speaking, to me it has no relevance nowadays. Every walk of life, every profession, uh, pretty much that you see allows a relaxed physical atmosphere. And I felt that at this point in history that it's appropriate to, and to your point, allowing people to be individuals,
yeah.
right? Does it change the way you're doing your job? No. Okay, having a beard does not affect the way that you address people, right? Having a beard does not um, affect the way that you do your job day to day. All right, it's not going to affect your productivity, your proactivity, or whatnot. And tattoos, more often now than ever, are a conversation piece, right? A lot of times we'll look at body camera footage where we had an individual that was, in crisis or very elevated as far as, anger and things like that. And we'll see videos where, an arm sleeve tattoo, they'll point out something, hey, what's that? And then the explanation of that kind of brings them down. And again, it's relatable, right? It's relatable. And when you're talking about a point in society where these things are acceptable, my philosophy as chief of police is it does not deter or alter, the way that you conduct yourself. Um, yeah, so we made the decision and whatnot, and that goes back again to letting people be themselves. All right. I've had an opportunity to do a lot of things here. And, I've had an opportunity to watch a lot of people do things. And there's clearly people that are better at some things than others, right? And if I'm doing my job, we have obviously a phrase, round pegs and round holes, and that's what we're doing. And, I'm blessed at this point to be able to, make sure that we're utilizing those individuals in the capacity that is going to make this department the most successful. A lot of that comes with different personality, and a lot of personalities come with different things. If that be the case, then I'm all for it, right? If it's going to make us better, then I'm all for
I really do believe that sometimes it's the small things that can make some of the biggest impacts. And like you said, just those small little things of recognizing individuality, especially if it's not going to negatively impact work performance. I had a mentor tell me one time, and obviously this is a little bit of a different context, but I think it still clocks. They told me because I think it's natural to want to emulate other people, right? And I think that especially if someone's successful, and I in my career was trying to be so much like everybody else. I was
it.
like, I really want to be that guy because he's so successful and like he's great and knowledgeable and has all this experience and it was to the point where I lost who I was in that, and someone came up to me and said, no one is going to be a better him than him, right? So like nobody's going to be a better Chief Kintner than Chief Kintner,
Hmm.
right? Who are you? Like people are going to value who you are as an individual, especially if there's authenticity in that. But when you're trying so hard to be someone else, I think it does give that vibe of like, inauthenticness or is that a word? Inauthenticness? I just coined it, a new word. So
It is today. So
you know what I'm getting at. I think
yes,
people are
absolutely.
like, wait, why is that person trying so hard to be someone else? And so giving the permission to be yourself
Hmm.
and for you to know that there's value in being yourself, that you don't have to try to be like everybody else to be successful. And I had to learn that kind of through experience in the hard way, where people are like,
Yeah,
why are you trying so hard to be that person? Like, who are you? Like, we
yeah,
are you. And so I love that you encourage that to let people be who they are authentically, and then value the individuality within the members of your team. Uh,
absolutely. Yeah, I think, I mean, historically, when you go through the academy process, very regimented, very disciplined and whatnot, but you went through a period where everybody was taught to walk the same, to act the same, that these small things were very important to your success, such as, how you wore your hat, or, the fact that you had this kind of uniform or whatnot. And again, I'll be the first to say it. It's not going to be popular. I don't agree with that. I think that, if you get through the process, if you establish yourself as professional, as capable and whatnot, as they say, let you do you, right? Here's what we need you to do. Hey, put your own personal stamp on it, and let's see where you head. And to your point, we just had a motivational speaker on Monday come and address a program that we run. I think we're going to have time to talk about that. But one of the first things he said when he talks about his paths, and he was an Olympic gold medalist. And the first bullet point that he puts up is know who you are.
mhm.
That's the first thing that you have to do to be successful. Know who you are.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and it's funny because this individual is not in law enforcement, is not, uh, you know, he's not familiar with the intimate details of what we do here in the agency, but he's coming from a different walk of life, saying the exact same thing that we say and we try to put out. And as I said, so important. And do I think that you need to pay attention to those people that come into your life that are successful? Absolutely. You
Yeah.
need to pay attention to the negative ones too, and
Mm.
then hopefully you do the right thing and you apply characteristics of the successful people to what you want to do and then make it yours, right?
Yeah.
None of this is patent. Like, there's going to be opportunities here that uh may be unique and maybe never seen before. And as we look at people and we evaluate them in the jobs that they're doing, um, you know, wellness and peer support is a perfect example. Most people don't come into this job thing saying someday I'm going to be involved in something very critical and go through a bunch of anxiety. Um, and then because of that, I'm going to be a counselor or I'm going to be right.
Yeah.
But to that point, we're here in this moment, and we've established as of 5 years ago this policy and this program and whatnot. I just think there's a lot of unnecessary anxiety that stems from the top down. And my job and our job is to reduce that as much as possible, right?
Yeah.
Let people be themselves, do the job that they were hired to do, uh, and be happy with it and want to be here, want to be a part of this and whatnot. So, and
Yeah.
and that ties into, again, all the stuff we're here to discuss today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to talk about how you prepare the younger generation or the next generation in a couple different contexts. And we talked about this a little bit, but one, like, how do you prepare the younger generation for the realities of this profession? Um, I think that's a question that comes up a lot. How do you prepare for some of the worst things that maybe you can't prepare for? How do you set the right expectations beforehand so that these younger people do understand what they're getting themselves into? And then I also know that you run a youth academy, and so inspiring the next generation. And so I'd love if you talked about both of those things.
Yeah, so I think they go hand in hand, and it's all about outreach, right? Like, so we get paid to do a job for 8 hours or 10 hours a day, and that's what we do. But it's beyond that, right? Like, what are you doing when you're not getting paid?
Mm,
And I go back to my own personal path. One of the things that helped me through the daily rigors of the job was um, you know, jumping in feet first into the local community organizations and whatnot. I'm the proud father of two boys. They were very involved in local organizations, athletics and whatnot. Obviously wanting to be involved and around that as much as I could. I took the opportunity to run a lot of those organizations, get involved in coaching early, and kind of made it my mission to try to share some of those uh, important factors about life, right? So it's kind of twofold. So jumping in and sharing and taking opportunities with the kids that don't necessarily want to be police officers, don't necessarily have any interest in law enforcement or what I do every day, but taking that opportunity to not only coach the physical part of the game, but the mental part of life that so often comes along with those things, right? Success, disappointment, failure, uh, and how to navigate that. That's life, right? So we have a phrase, catch them young, right? And the program that we run, I'm very proud to say this is our 13th year. Uh,
wow.
we started the program when I was actually working as a school resource officer in the high school. I saw a disconnect and a breakdown with, um, communication. Kids, I would stand at the front door every day as the kids would walk in, and I would greet them, and 75% of the kids wouldn't even look at me, right? The back to the barriers, the badge, the gun, and those things. And it frustrated me, growing up in the environment that I grew up in, having the respect for the profession that I had, that kids felt that they couldn't even say good morning or hello or whatnot. So uh, we did some, brainstorming, and I came up with an idea of maybe having an academy style program, bringing in local law enforcement, and kind of setting some things in place where we could communicate these characteristics for success, talk about some school issues, but also show them the funner side of law enforcement too, the SWAT, crime scene, the canines, and stuff like that is becoming so popular. So we started in 2012 with 17 kids, and this year, at the end of the next week, we'll graduate 170 through this summer's program. But so much of that comes back to what you discussed, and I should preface this with it. It was never the intent of the program to recruit kids to do this job. It was the intent to foster better relationships so they felt comfortable.
Yeah.
A good example being, I won't allow my officers to wear uniforms when they instruct. I'm blessed to have a team of 5 SROs that coordinate and run the program for me nowadays. They wear golf shorts and polos. That's what they wear, right? And the purpose of that, psychologically, they no longer see the badge and the gun on the officer. They see the person, right? They see the coach behind, um, behind the profession. And it's been so successful for us as far as, uh, returning participants and communication during the school year and whatnot. So we're very proud of that. But uh, I will say it's my job to extend support into the community, right? I need to take care of my house first, my police department, my officers. But if I can present that outside of this building, we talked about internal, external. It's so important to continue to do that and to give the kids the tools, the kids that may be in your situation that you grew up in right now, to give them something to belong to
Yeah.
be able to say, we appreciate you. We want to see you every day. Great job, right? Physical training is a big part of the youth academy. We do it every morning. And if a kid can walk a half a lap, we're congratulating him. And if he can walk a whole lap the next day, we're making him feel like he's on top of the world, he or she, right? So important. And the team has bought into that. And now it's not just the chief saying it, it's everybody on the team saying it. And then again, that word that I like, reinforcing it every single time we have the opportunity.
Yeah.
So uh, the unintended effect of that was that we now have about 50, 60 people that have come through the program, which has graduated over 1,000 kids that are enjoying a career in law enforcement,
Wow.
fire department, or some other emergency services because what they've seen. So
That is so inspiring. I actually have chills because you can see the direct impact, right? You said 50, 60 kids were so inspired that they wanted to enter into this profession.
yeah,
I think that's incredible. And even for those who didn't choose a career in law enforcement or in the first responder profession, to, like you said, make them feel valued, supported, on
yep.
top of the world and successful, through that program, I think is so inspiring.
I have four working for me now in my
That's
department. Yeah.
that's incredible. I love that. What words of wisdom would you share with the younger generation? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
So I would say prioritize yourself, right? We are, by nature, we are natural problem solvers. That's what we do. We deal with everybody else's problems. And in that mix, we forget about ourselves. And what we see is the more or the less that we put into our own issues or our own personal life, now we see the manifestation of, those issues later that we discussed earlier. So prioritize yourselves. Stay positive in the negative. That's what I like to say to the recruits when I get to teach in the academies and things like that. Stay positive in the negative, right? Find a way to do it, whether it be physically or find a network of communication that you're comfortable with, an outlet, right? For me and my path, that was always my family. My wife was a great partner, my high school sweetheart. She knew what I wanted to do. She was fully behind me the whole time. And she knew that what it was going to entail on those difficult days when I came home. Got to talk about things. You got to, and I will say this, which may not be popular. You got to hold your administrations accountable. Okay. My job, our job in these positions is to give you the tools and the resources to get through those difficult times. Okay. If they're not doing that, you need to hold them accountable. This is where we have to get. All right. We know where we've been and we're on a good path forward. We've made significant strides in this effort, right? With our teams, with our programs, with our opportunities to take people that have been through those that are on the job, to take them that have the ones that have been through the most difficult things are the ones that are on my peer support team, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to have the best insight into it. And so I would say, one, prioritize yourself, rely and lean on people that you trust, right? You have to have that outlet. You have to communicate it. You'll feel better at the end of the day. Physically prioritize yourselves, I'm a big 5:30 guy. I'm on the treadmill every morning. And that's, usually I'm listening to something motivational or spiritual or something like that. Set my mind right. I don't watch the news. I don't do any of that. Um, it goes back to the individual, the admiral, which he said, "You make your bed, start every day with a completed task, right? You will feel better. I promise you." And I know that's tough with shifts and whatnot, but I've been able to navigate that. I didn't always work 8 to 4 and administration and whatnot. Um, but also, and I would end with this: remember how you felt when you got the job.
Mm.
If I could bottle that, right,
Hmm.
and serve it up every day, how great would this profession be? So
Yeah.
when you talk about the burnout and people, not being where they thought they should be at this stage in the career, and then you start to see the decline and whatnot. I often have said, remember how you felt when you got the job. We all took this for the same reason. One of your previous interviews, you asked the chief, and he said, the common answer is, I wanted to help people. I want to help people, right? That's why I want the job. And then you go through this extraordinary process nowadays to get hired, right? My dad in 1969 had an interview with the chief alone. He was asked one simple question. He answered it. He told him he was starting on Monday. Okay. Now, in the state of New York, you have to take the civil service exam. You have to pass the physical component to that. Then you go into your background check. Then you go into your interviews and your processes and whatnot that with your respective teams, which is grueling. It's a grueling process. And at the end of it, when you're told, we want you here, we want to make you part of our team. I've seen the reaction. I know what it is. It's always the same. Individuals are happy and pleased to have made it. It's such a significant achievement.
Yeah.
But if you can remember that moment and you can apply it every day, why you took the job, why you wanted to do this to begin with, right? It wasn't to make $1 million. We all know that, right? We do fairly well nowadays, and we're taken care of. Our government officials look out for us and help us through contracts, and there's not a lot of pushback and things like that. So we are very supported. But remember how you felt that day, and also remember. So as chief of police, probably most difficult job I've had, not because I'm working 20 hours a day or anything like that. I'm so far removed from why I took the job in this position,
Mm.
right? When you ask people why they want to do it and they say, I want to help people, not one applicant that I've ever interviewed, and I've interviewed many, has said, someday I want to deal with personnel complaints, budget, administrative dilemmas, and things of that nature, right? So they truly have the best opportunity coming out of the gate to make a difference, to make the most impact, to be a bigger part of the community. And I always tell our people, like, leave it better than you found it, right? How are you going to do that? We've done some tremendous things here, and I'm not a credit person. Like, that's why I say we, um, because it takes a team to be able to do that. But I'm excited about the future of the profession. As I said, uh, we're doing the right things, we're making the right decisions, and we're prioritizing things accordingly now. So I firmly believe that it's better than it's ever been.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I feel like I could talk to you all day, but that's all the time we have for today. And I really do appreciate you coming
sure.
on here and sharing your experiences and the things you're doing organizationally and your wisdom. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and thank you for what you are doing.
Of course. Thank you.